you, Makiling Ballet of the Philippine High School for the Arts, for that wonderful performance. We now move on to the session on copyright infringement and compensation issues in publishing. We have with us to share their insights on the topic, Mr. Alvin J. Benaventura. Mr. Alvin Benaventura is the Executive Director of the Filipinas Copyright Licensing Society, Incorporated, the collective management organization in the text and image sector operating in the Philippines. Let's all give Mr. Alvin Benaventura a warm welcome. He will be joined by Mr. Yani Kurniawan. Mr. Yani is the founder of Liter Asia, a website covering publishing news in Asia. Formerly a copyright coordinator at Serambi Publishing House in 2010. He joined Tuttle-Mori agency as a rights agent, handling the territory of Indonesia. He is also a member of Indonesia National Book Committee, where he handles literary promotions and publishing rights. Let's all give a warm welcome to Mr. Yani Kurniawan. This session will be moderated by one of the session speaker, Ms. Ruth Valorie Catabijan. Ms. Ruth Valorie is the Business Development Manager of textbook publisher St. Matthew's Publishing Corporation and the editor of its children's book imprint, Kahel Press. She is the publisher of various fiction and non-fiction books for children. Let's give Ms. Ruth a warm welcome.
So good morning to everyone. I'd really hate to come in between the audience and lunchtime, but we'll do our best. So for today, we're gonna talk about something really fun. It's fun to talk about, but it's not really fun when it happens to you. So a bulk of our presentation today is about copyright infringement. And I'd like to ask for help to bring my slides up on the screen. Okay. So for today, we have 20. So for today, we have different industry stakeholders. So I'll be representing publishers. We also have a literary agent, so that's Yani. And Sir Alvin is from the CMO, or the Collective Management Organization, which is called PhilCols here in the Philippines. So, do I have a clicker? All right. Thank you po. Okay, so copyright infringement, and you've changed this to compensation issues because royalties are not the only things that authors and artists are being paid with nowadays. So we'll talk about different kinds of compensations as well. So, do I point this to my head? All right, so next slide, please. So I'm part of St. Matthew's Publishing and Kahel Press. So we do textbooks and children's books under Kahel Press. Next slide. And for today, it looks quite long, but I'll be going over very quickly some examples on copyright infringement. Since I can't talk about what happened to other people, I'm gonna talk about what happened to St. Matthew. So like what I said, it's fun to talk about because of all the chismes, but when it happens to you, it's not so fun. So first, we have some examples of when, next slide please, when a publisher, another publisher infringes on your works. So we have, this is actually, you can search this. So if you go to Google, enter these keywords, you'll find the IPO's description of what happened to us. So we won the case. Yeah, so it's possible for publishers to win cases such as these. So we've had 13 books from us infringed by one of our former clients. So they're a school, and what they did was, instead of ordering from us the next year, they started photocopying our book. So what they did was, what happened was, there was a parent who had a kid in that same school, and then she noticed, sorry, Yani, why is this new version for my second kid like an uglier version of the first one? Because they just photocopied it and then put on a new cover. So that's how we found out, because the mom went to us in the hopes of getting a nicer copy of the book. And so when we found out, we filed a case, there was a raid, and eventually we were able to settle everything with the help of the Intellectual Property Office. So it's possible for other publishers to infringe on the works of a publisher. Next slide, please. This happened quite recently. We became internet famous for this. So this is an example of one of our picture book artists doing artwork plagiarism. So she plagiarized the work of a Korean illustrator, and then she put it on our book. So a lot of people are saying, no, the publisher is bad. There's no creativity in the publishing industry. I bet the publisher was the one who told her to copy that. Well, that's not really what happened with us, and we actually have in our contracts, and that's why contracts are friends. That's why we're still settling this with the artist. She's very cooperative. Actually, before this whole thing boomed, she told us she was very apologetic. So we're just settling things according to our contract and making the most of this experience to teach other people about how to respect copyrights. So next slide, please. And here we also have copyright infringement by users. So I actually presented this in the Asian Publishers, sorry, I forgot the name of the workshop, but one of our speakers, Hisa, from PHP Institute in Japan, was my classmate in that course. And we had it in Korea, so they were talking about social media and the work of editors. So sometimes when you work in a publishing house, you do everything. You're an editor, you're the cargador, you're the salesperson. So here, I'm also a private investigator. And so we found out that a lot of people were messaging us on Facebook. We were still quite new to Facebook at that time because we didn't think we'd need to reach out to like parents and all that, since at that time, we only did textbooks. We worked directly with schools, so our agents would go to different parts of the country, going to schools, and we didn't really have a need for Facebook at that time. So we were wondering, why are people sending us the same images? And where is it coming from? Why are they interested in our books? And these are teachers individually asking us, can we get copies of this book set? So next slide, please. So we went viral in Facebook groups. So there are groups like kindergarten teachers all over the Philippines. So that's where we became famous. And a lot of people were posting and asking about our books. So some were starting to copy the books already. So like they would have a copy, teachers who were using the books in the classroom would photocopy it or resell it, or they make book-alikes and they would resell it to their teachers. It's what we call unauthorized distribution and copyright infringement, because in terms of unauthorized distribution, they would resell the books that were for classroom use. So they use the school's resources to distribute the books for their personal gain. Next slide, please. And people started posting our content in these groups. So our book is in chronological order. Week 1, these are the activities. And they would do the same. Okay, for week 1, let's do this. And they would post the activities for that week. And it would go on for quite some time, so per week, per day. They would just share because they thought it was okay to share the content with their fellow teachers all over the Philippines. All right, so next, what happened, again, was, as I mentioned, unauthorized sellers emerged. Next slide, please. And so what did we do? We gave fair warning. In Facebook groups, you have to be mindful of the rules. So we didn't really want to come off as, trying to sell within these groups, although there are a lot of people who do that. So we had to ask permission from the moderators of the group. Hi, I'm the publisher of this book. There's copyright infringement going on. can we post a public notice because this is kind of wrong? And so we had this, the earlier photo was heavily watermarked because we're that paranoid. So anyway, we gave fair warning. We would talk to individual comments. And we would try to explain to people like, hey, that's copyright infringement. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And we would inform others to do the right thing because many Filipinos don't know that copyright infringement is wrong. So if you can see the text at the bottom, and it's in Filipino. So the commenter, or one of the kindergarten teachers said, paano po pag may gustong ipaserox yung books nyo na binibili ko? Okay lang po ba yun instead na bumili po? Tanong lang po, ma'am. And so, to translate this, what if someone asked me if they can photocopy the books that I bought instead of them buying the books for themselves? So for us as publishers, like, what really are there such questions? Why would people ask this? Isn't this common sense? Apparently it's not. So as publishers, we really have to take time to educate people about copyright infringement because one, we lose sales, diba? And we don't like that. Two, for me, copyright infringement or the state of that in our country is a reflection of how we value education in general in our country. So how do we treat the intellect or the work of people who have worked so hard on what they've written? Next slide, please. And so what happened? So like I mentioned, we messaged the moderators, we talked to people individually, and then we gained support. So what this means, people started telling us, ma'am, may nag-post po ulit. I'm sorry. Someone posted again that they're trying to sell your books. Are they authorized? Then I would tell them, no, they're not authorized, but thanks for telling me. So other people would give us support because they already know that it's wrong. So yeah, kindergarten teachers are awesome. Next slide, please. And then we started, I had to tell my mom, I mean my boss, my mom, that maybe instead of selling this strictly for school, since it's a past edition, we can just sell it to people individually because these would have gone to scrap or donated or something. So we started taking in orders. In our public notice, we told them, if you want to order, you go to our correct or our official communication channels. And we would get these orders through Facebook, through email, through different manners. And it was really hard. So we would do it manually, like give them our bank details, they'll deposit it, we'll wait for it and everything. And then we would ship it, because there's GRS Express below our office. Anyway, and then we started learning about Lazada. So I really understand what the representative from NEDA mentioned about working with the e-commerce, working on the e-commerce roadmap. So I have more comments on that, but here is a problem. We started out with a problem, and now it gave us around 2 million pesos worth of sales. So it's not so bad to have such a problem as long as you work on it properly and you communicate it well with your potential customers. Next slide, please. So what did we learn? So first of all, be understanding because yun nga, not a lot of people know that copyright infringement is wrong. So we really have to work hard to educate people about it. Next, we have to be patient. So changing a behavior takes time. Not everyone's gonna get it right away, but they will eventually if you're very patient about it. And then also be available, attend to inquiries. There were a lot of comments, a lot of posts about the copyright infringement case that happened, but you have to be available to all of them. So there's no one small matter for this because it really takes time, it takes a lot of effort, and that's something we have to understand in this push for understanding on copyright infringement. Next slide, please. So that's pretty much the bulk of my experience in terms of copyright infringement and my presentation about it. We can discuss it later during the open forum. So the next part of my talk and also the panel in general is about compensation. So when we talk about pricing, people say many different things about it. I hear some people, when I was asking for inputs for this presentation, sir, what do you think I should raise regarding pricing for the panel session? How about we have a standard pricing for paying our authors and illustrators? What do you guys think? Maybe I'll ask you guys during the open forum later. Nagbaliktad. So anyway, from what I learned from the personal MBA is that pricing can be anything you want it to be. So you have Summit, yung tubig, the water bottle, and it's just 20 pesos, right? But the same bottle can cost more for Evian, right? It's the same product, it's water, but you have to be able to provide the reason why you're putting it at that price. So I think it's the same for compensation. If you can defend your pricing, then I think you can come into terms with a good contract or an agreement with your content creators. Next slide, please. So there are two types of compensations. There's outright or one-time payment, which I feel illustrators are more agreeable with. And then there are royalties. And just to mention a few more things about royalties, there are things such as advance royalties. So these are advances against your royalties. Before the sales are made, you get an advance payment for the work that you've done. So I'm not saying that these are the things that should be done. These are the things that you can do, or the ways that you can pay your authors. And then there are also scaling royalties. The rate for royalties can change. So for us, we have a table in our contracts for content creators. If you have, for the first print run, and before you reach 5,000 copies, your rate is this much. But if you surpass 5,000 copies, it could get higher. And then there's also a combination. So sometimes you pay outright, and then you promise maybe for the next print run, you can do it in terms of royalties. And then here, royalties, just to explain it better, they are dependent on the sales of the book. And for royalties, there's really no single basis for them. So it depends on your contract or your agreement with the people that you're working with. They can be based on the following things. So the SRP, the gross sales net of discount, net profits, actual profits, or I don't know what else you can come up with, but as long as you agree with it, it's fine. Next slide, please. Subsidiary rights. These are also part of the royalties that your content creators can receive as long as you agree on them. So part of them are royalties from translations, paperbacks, hardbacks, radio, TV, magazine, even theme parks. So J.K. Rowling gets royalties from having a theme park after her characters or of her book. So in terms of rights and dealing with them, maybe we can ask Yani about them. So he's a literary agent, right? Okay, so next slide, please. So what are some of the issues that we have in terms of paying content creators and publishers? So I put publishers here because we also receive royalties, especially when we sell our rights or when we license the rights on behalf of the content creators, if they agree. So here we have the common things like non-payment of royalties. Some publishers saying they don't have any sales, but I've seen someone in another NBDB event, she says that I see my book in a bookstore, but then my publisher tells me that there's no sales or it's not being sold. So there are these problems between publishers and content creators. We also have, this is a concern by a lot of publishers, content creators. They say that their publisher requires official receipts before payment of royalties. So there is some basis for your publishers to request for your official receipts, but medyo naiipit or they get caught in between because your publishers can't not issue the royalties because it's part of their expenses. So it's just gonna get messed up in terms of accounting. And later on, I'd really like to ask questions to the representative in BIR in terms of how we can work with BIR to solve this problem. Next, no contracts, sorry. Go back to the slide, please. So there are no contracts or vague contracts. I've met artists who don't have contracts with their publishers, and they're completely okay with it. I think for a lot of Filipinos, we're not used to working with contracts. Medyo handshake agreement lang tayo. Sometimes that's fine. Oftentimes it's not. So we have to learn that contracts are friends. I hope to say that 3 times today. Contracts are friends, or even though there's a contract, it can be vague. So some people tell us that our 16-page publishing contract for Kahel Press is so long. Some people say like, that's good, it's clear, at least I know what I'm gonna do, or what's gonna happen when we encounter certain scenarios in our agreement. But for some vague contracts, I hear from people that they have like 1-page contracts. And if something happens, they don't know what they're gonna do as the content creator. I'm not saying that the publisher who gave you a 1-page contract is bad, not right away. It might just be that the publishers need more training or more exposure to working or reading contracts. Then next, we have, okay, so I'll just give you the slides. So anyway, so we have the NBDB 2017 readership survey. So a lot of authors and artists also say, bakit ang baba ng royalties? Why are the royalties so low? I'll just work with a foreign publisher. Because here in the Philippines, the publishers are so kuripot. They don't pay so much. But what are the reasons why the royalties are low? So in the last readership survey, one of the reasons that I can see why royalties are low, and remember, royalties are related to sales. So if your price points are low, your royalties are also going to be low. Unless you sell thousands and thousands of books, that's the only way that you can bump it up, because a lot of Filipinos are very sensitive to the pricing of their books. It came out that most Filipinos are willing to spend only up to about 200 pesos for a book. So that's one reason, and let's explore some more challenges. Next slide. So other challenges that we face with publishers and literary agents: some don't provide contracts, some do not reply at all or very late, they're hard to communicate with, they don't know much about contracts. There's also copyright infringement or plagiarism within publisher to publisher. And there's limited knowledge or access to international distribution, especially for us in the Philippines, because I don't think we're making use of the ISBN properly. So maybe that's something that the National Library can help us with as well. Next slide, please. Some challenges with our authors and illustrators. So this is in the in general, there are also a lot of unregistered professionals. So this is where the OR comes in. Your publishers get penalties when you don't give OR. So we really have a hard time when it comes to reporting to the BIR. And many don't read their contracts. We've had this unfortunate experience that this artist was talking about, like, I don't like what my publisher did because ang baba, what they paid me was so low. And I'm like, but you're royalty based. And he didn't talk about that in that person's post. So I'm not sure if he just didn't read his contract or he was just trying to create clout and not share that about other people. And there's also copyright infringement or plagiarism amongst the content creators. That sometimes happen. It's happened to us a few times already, which I shared earlier. And sometimes I would check the resources of the the content creators who give us their manuscripts, and I see like, hey, this is from this book. I mean, it's exactly the same. So we have a hard time verifying content. So that's where the contract comes in very handy for publishers as well. Next slide, please. Okay, challenges with the government. I'll do the sandwich approach. So I'll say something nice first. I love the NBDB. I love the NBDB. They give us free workshops and trainings all the time. Oh, they're not part of late responses and being unresponsive. They actually respond very quickly, and they do take time to hear out the concerns of their stakeholders. So that's not them. Some other agencies. So there's also a vague tax code. There are also vague tax code provisions. For example, for VAT, books are supposedly non-VAT, but e-books are not. According to the Florence Agreement, I don't think we're following it quite properly with in terms of that, but also also in terms of the ORs. So sometimes there was a time when I asked BIR, how do we apply for how does an author apply for exemption to Section 237? So I ask about it a lot. I remember the code. So the Section 237 of the tax code, which is provision of OR. And they moved me from one division to the other over phone until I reach a non-existing division. I don't know how that happened, but nobody can answer my question. How do we do it? And then there's also strict ISBN issuance. It's hard for us to sell abroad or have more books counted in the productivity of the Philippines if it's so hard for some publishers and individuals to get ISBN. Singapore allows their citizens to get ISBN free of charge, and also you don't need to be a registered business for that. So there's also lack of policies for booksellers. So next slide, please. And we're expected to price our books low, but cost is very high, especially with the train law. When the train law came in, fuel prices went up, affected manufacturing industries, including printing. So it's costly, and paper supply is also very costly and hard to get nowadays. And distribution challenges are also, it's getting harder and harder. You see a lot of bookstores having sales, and when they have sales, they also ask their publishers, like, can you make your discount to us bigger, right? So that happens, and sometimes it's hard to find the local books in their shelves. So I think we need to put more incentives or motivate or incentivize our booksellers more, because if we just keep making books, we're not able to sell them. I mean, we're just gonna run out of money for making them. And there's also the preference for foreign books, preference for school and office supplies. So the shelf space for books are getting smaller. Logistics, we are an archipelago with many islands. And there's also an unorganized categorization. You can't find our Kahel Press books in the children's book section. Some have even asked us, can we put you in the business section? Because we had a book for kids on saving up money. Like, okay, no. So anyway, next slide, please. For users, so we've discussed this already: copyright infringement, unauthorized distribution, collection of payments for school clients, and we also have limited modes of payment. Sorry, this is wrong. So next slide, please. I have some recommendations for everyone. So one is, I think it's quite urgent. We need to dialogue with the BIR, especially with the BIR issue for our content, from our content creators. For government and the NGOs, provide long format trainings on the legal aspect of the publishing industry. I really like the Publishing 101 workshops of the NBDB a few years back. It's actually where I met Sir Alvin. So anyway, they really took time, like it was multiple sessions for one course. And I think it was more productive, and the learning is deeper in terms of understanding copyright infringement at that time, or the book publishing industry. Maybe we can talk more about writing contracts. For us, even our lawyer, our retainer lawyer, doesn't know much about publishing contracts. They don't know the trends. They just know contracts in general. But we don't really have that much knowledge about it within the industry. I think the only one I know who is knowledgeable about that, or the most knowledgeable, is Attorney Andrea. And I hope Attorney Andrea would teach us, right? So let's message her on Facebook and ask her about it. So, ask NBDB to message her so that we can all learn together. And then for individuals and publishers, ask questions, learn how to negotiate, because you don't, sometimes people forget that contract is negotiable. And we're not scary when you talk to us, like for the content creators, we're not that scary. You know, we've changed a couple of our contracts upon the request of our content creators. And also find resources on publishing contracts. Next slide, please. So these are some examples of our resources with St. Matthew's Publishing. We have the Clark's Publishing Agreement. So what's nice about this book is on the left side, on the right side of the book, you have the contract template. On the left side is the footnotes of what each part of that contract means. So there are many different kinds. So there's the general book publishing contract. There's a contract between getting artworks for your book, working with a general editor for a series. So many different kinds of contracts with this kind of book, with this book. Next slide, please. So the book that I mentioned earlier, the blue one, that's actually like 10,000 pesos. So if you don't want to spend 10,000 pesos on that book, you can get this. It's from my favorite US publisher, Microcosm Publishing. It's called A People's Guide to Publishing by Joe Biel. They talk about the publishing business in general. They also have a section on contracts, and they're very generous about what they share in this book. So there are a lot of contract templates here as well, and even some ingress forms for their author, so that you can know your author better and how you can work better with them. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to squeeze this in earlier. So since we're talking about copyright infringement, I want to talk about copyright limitations. So Ms. Nani mentioned earlier about Bookshare, the Marrakesh Treaty, and it's really, next slide please, and it's really helping the print disabled Filipinos here. So Bookshare is a US-based company. They have Bookshare Philippines here, and they're doing good work, a lot of efforts to try to convince publishers to donate content. Because, next slide please. All right, so we have problems in terms of accessibility with our books. And these are like regular print books, but what more for those who are blind? What more for those who cannot hold a book properly? So there is a bigger book famine for them. And I think as publishers, you know, we're here in the business of education, and I think it's our responsibility to be able to make the content available to as many people as possible while still earning money to be sustainable, right? But for those who really need the books, I think we should be able to lend a hand for this. We don't, Attorney Buhayin, we don't earn anything from this. But what we do gain is, it's an investment for the country. At the same time, we get a lot of free workshops and trainings from Bookshare. We're learning more about ebooks actually from them, because we don't really have that knowledge within our company. So that's one thing that you can gain out of it. So I think I've talked too much already. Thank you very much. All right. So our next speaker is Mr. Yani Kurniawan from Tuttle-Mori, Indonesia. He is a literary agent. So Yani, please. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you, Wobi. My name is Yani Kurniawan. I'm from Tuttle-Mori, and I'm a member of the National Book Committee in Indonesia as well. So initially, when Kay emailed me asking for my participation, and then Wobi sent her presentation first, I thought that already covers everything. So it's thank you, Wobi. It's very comprehensive, so my presentation will be short. So basically, I can tell you my perspective in as a literary agent and working in Indonesia. So basically, what we're fighting regarding copyright infringement and royalty issues in publishing. Next slide, please. So a brief introduction on the issue. So there are three losses for the publishers if your work is there's an infringement on your work. So you obviously as a publisher you lost. There's a financial loss. You don't have the royalty that you should have because your book is being pirated or copied, and then the loss of your the quality. The pirated book, of course, will have different qualities because to cut the cost, they will have to be produced in in lower quality papers, and then perhaps the illustration were copied or even redraw, and then the loss of trust. Basically, if you deal the book, for example, in Indonesia, you don't deal with foreign publishers, so they translate you translate your book and then the publish. So when the sales reports are due and you're making report to the original proprietor, and then they take a record report, and they will ask you why. They sometimes ask you why the sales are so low. Why I only receive so little money? Because I hear that my book is well received in Indonesia. The answer, the publisher will have difficulty to answer this because, well, your book is being pirated. Then okay, and what did you do with knowing the fact that my book is being pirated? Well, it's difficult. It's difficult to answer it. And then the impact is that the original publisher or the original proprietor will no longer want to do business with you. So if you done nothing with how my book is being pirated, then I will not dealing any more titles with you. And of course, that is a huge loss for us. And then next slide, please. And then I want to talk about the channels of pirated books in Indonesia. I'm not sure if this same applies in the Philippines, but we have huge problem with online marketplace like Lazada, Shopee. We have two unicorns startup online platform. We have Tokopedia and we have Bukalapak as well. So basically, you just type a title that you want to buy, and then you have probably will find the pirated copies for a quarter of the price from the original. For example, if the original copy costs you 1,000 pesos, the pirated version will only cost you 250 pesos, something like that. And then we also have thrown into the traditional market store. So we cannot check the original quality, but they're available there as well. And then PDFs. So there are people who are willingly to scan the books and then put it. Knowledge is free, so but yeah, it happens. And photocopies in your school, but usually for the academic titles. So next slide, please. So what I was speaking about, this is the sample of the pirated contents. So this is the original copy. You have a price of 4,000. The price is 1,000 rupiah, around that. So next slide, please. So this is the pirated version. Similar price, but they get 4 books for the tetralogy. So you can see that the publisher of course will be filing a complaint to the online platform, and then they probably will close it the next day, but then the vendors will open it a few days later. So next slide, please. So a few months ago, in August, some publishers in Yogyakarta had enough. So they started a social movement. So they released a press release, and then they made it a big deal, and they're going to the police station, and they asked so they blow this up to the social media, so the Twitter and then Facebook. So they really make a big deal out of it, demanding that one of the traditional market in Yogyakarta called shopping. So they sell pirated books. They demand that the place is closed. So I'm not sure if the case is similar with Philippines, but that's what happens in Indonesia. So these publishers, they're starting a movement, and then demanded the police and the law authority to close the traditional market. So one of our problem, particularly in Indonesia, is it's easy to identify which pirated copies. But our main problem is the law enforcement. So we have the law, but the enforcement is basically zero. So we can report it, but I haven't heard anything about financial gain, if the law should successful or not. So none so far. So the law enforcement is really our problem in Indonesia. So what we expect is that the government, especially with this new cabinet, that they will eventually be serious about it. So applying a more strict law to pirated content, and actually doing something to prevent that, to prevent the pirated copy. And I was Hillary, in a few slides, I was speaking about the photocopies version that happens in the university. So recently, in Indonesia, a collective management, we call it PRCI, similar with VCOLS here. It's just established. So they approach universities that, of course, notorious with their students copying. So they demand the universities for the students to pay a yearly fee. So if the students pay yearly fee, and then they can copy a maximum of 30% from the book that registered to the PRCI. So I think that's one way to that I'm also curious to hear more. Perhaps we'll be hearing more about this with Mr. Alvin. So I'm curious as well about that as well. I think that concludes my presentation today. So I'm looking forward to hear your question, and we'll have a more presentation later. Thank you.
Thank you, Yani. So I guess we have something in common with Indonesia. So we both have Lazada and Shopee. Actually, if you check the ebook section, it's kind of shady. So maybe that's something that the National Book Development Board can work with NEDA in terms of the e-commerce roadshow that was discussed earlier. So just like what Yani said, we'd all like to hear more from Sir Alvin in terms of what a collective management organization does. So what do we do when schools and students are photocopying our books? So let's hear it for Sir Alvin Buenaventura of Philcos.
Maraming salamat po. Bago po ako magsimula, gusto ko lang i-acknowledge ang present ng founding chairman ng National Book Development Board, si Attorney Dominador Buhain. Please give him a warm round of applause. Siya po ang nagpasimuno ng NBDB para mabuhay ang ating book industry. At kung kayo ay nasa lugar ng Marikina, inimbitahan ko po kayo magpunta sa James Dean Cafe. Maganda po doon, kay Attorney Buhain din yun. At meron din po siyang book museum. Book museum, you have to visit it. Kahit isang beses lang sa buhay ninyo bago kayo pumikit. Kasi sayang kapag hindi nyo nakita yung collection ni Attorney at saka yung mga librong napakaliit at napaka-unique. These are great artifacts. So, that's in Marikina Heights. That's near St. Scholastica's Academy. Hindi po kayo mawawala pag sinabing Kulasa. Si Ma'am Karina, Saints ko yan. Pag sinabing Saints ko sa Marikina, hindi po kayo mawawala. Malapit po sa St. Scholastica's Academy, Marikina Heights, ang Book Cafe at James Dean Cafe. Ano si James Dean? Idol ni sir. Okay. So, I know it's already lunchtime, pero from time to time, it's good to fast a little. Diba? Nagpapakahirap tayo mag-keto diet, kung ano-ano pa. So, ito po yung pagkakataon. Huwag nyo muna isipin yung lunch. No? Mamimit nyo rin yung lunch mamaya. But I'll just speak for 10 minutes. Don't worry. I'm a fast speaker. Okay, so a healthy book publishing industry means the primary sector is functioning well. That's the turf of WAWI kanina, where the author and the publisher are guided by contracts and the author receives royalties. Next, the secondary use sector is where I belong, the CMO. The CMO has rights holders for its members, and when we give out remuneration. And then the last sector is called the fair use sector, which we are all familiar with. Okay, so that's in the next slide. Why? Because in 1978, there was a great man who said that at 38 pesos, textbooks are expensive. His name was Ferdinand Marcos. And as a dictator, he created Presidential Decree 1203, which is the compulsory licensing of books, which resulted in the reprinting of textbooks. So marami pong libro noon na ginagamit when I was still studying na nakalagay reprinted under Presidential Decree 1203. That's a problem that still persists up to now. The law was changed in 1998 to do away with this 1203 Presidential Decree, but still people continue to reproduce materials to photocopy books, no, saying na fair use naman yung ginagawa ko. Even universities whose car sticker is much more expensive, kaysa magbayad sila ng license to reuse copyrighted works. Ang kakapal ng mukha, and these are Catholic schools. They're stealing. They'll go to hell. Yeah, I'm sure they'll go to hell. Stealing is one of the commandments. Thou shalt not steal. Diba? Una-una dun yung mga pari. Okay, so there was an amendment to our intellectual property code. That's in 2013. Why? Again, because we have to change the, next slide na po. We have to change the wording because in our copyright law, it states there that multiple copies for classroom use is not an infringement of copyright. Siyempre, yun pala yung nasa batas multiple copies di walang habas na pagkokopya, pagre-reproduce. So, in 2013, that multiple word was removed and changed with limited copies for classroom use. Next question is, define limited. So what happened was, siyempre, alam mo, pilosopo ang mga tao, di ba? At makakalusot, lulusot. So, ano ibig sabihin ng limited? So, in the next slide, the Book Development Association of the Philippines crafted the Fair Use Guidelines. This is in response to Section 230 of the new law, wherein it's an 8-page long document. If you want to read it, I can send it to you. We distributed copies of this to the National Book Development Board, to the IP office, and also to some book industry associations. When this was crafted, PEPA and BDAP and other, and CHED and DepEd were consulted. And for them, for the book industry and for the authors, ito yung gist, no? 8 pages po siya Para sa kanila, you may only copy 5% of a book. 5% only. Beyond 5%, you have, if you want to copy really more, you have to either buy the book or get a license from a CMO. Why is that so? Ganito po yan Nagpupunta kayo sa mall, di ba? Merong free taste. Di ba? Free taste ng hotdog. So kakain ka ng free taste, konti lang yun, di ba? Bakit? The purpose is to whet your appetite so that you'd get the whole pack of hot dogs. Makapal lang mukha mo kapag sinabi mo, teka lang kukuha lang ako ng only rice, uupo ko sa harap mo, yan, nauulamin ko. Di ba? Kaya lang ganun po ang nangyayari. Akala nila yung fair use ay daan para kumopya sila na walang habas. Mali po iyon. So, the fair use guidelines was crafted and as, yung next slide, as a collective management organization, yun po yung general term, CMO. And kami po sa PhilCos or Filipinas Copyright Licensing Society, we deal with the reproduction rights ng mga author. So, yun po yung specific term, RRO. There are many CMOs in the Philippines, no? So we have music CMO, PhilSCAP, PhilCos for text and image. You have Performers Rights Society of the Philippines. Wala pa po sa visual artists, broadcasters, and theatrical works. We always get queries from France. One of the oldest is in France. It's called SACEM. Hindi po kayo pwede mag-stage play na walang permit. Sa atin, ganun pa rin. Bakit? Wala pong system eh. Yung sinasabi ni Sir na fledgling tayo, hindi, itlog pa lang po tayo. Sa sistema sa buong mundo, nasa itlog stage pa lang po tayo. So, meron pa po 3 CMO na kailangang itayo. We have to do our best to look after these rights. Now, in 1984, that's the next slide, there was an international organization of all RROs in the world. There are 143 now, present in 79 countries. The largest is in the US. They were established in 1978. They were existing like 8 years before, and they were only able to collect after they sued a university. Kasi matigas ang ulo eh. Fair use din kasi sa US. So they sued the university, and they were able to collect after 16 years. The oldest CMO in the world is called Fagevort. This is based in Germany. If you'd notice that the year is 1957, why? Because that's the time when photocopying machines started to mushroom in all schools and offices. And Indonesia, you mentioned it, Yani mentioned it, they have Perkumpulan Reproduksi Cipta Indonesia. I met the first general manager. I was in Yogyakarta in 2012, Tino Germany, and they have a new one. So it's really a challenge to license, no? And I'll tell you about that later. Okay. So copyright is a bundle of rights, and we're only managing one right. And we deal with the large-scale reproduction of works, not single-use, large-scale. Yung every semester is being used by the schools for universities, for institutional use, or for large organizations like the DepEd. We're licensing the DepEd. We also get license from the LGUs when they reproduce materials, and some foundations also. The PhilCos, as a CMO, is only a support to the book industry. So you have BDAP there, and you have PEPA there. We only provide secondary remuneration. Next, who are our members? Our members are called rights holders because these are authors, publishers, and heirs of authors. These copyright owners assign the reproduction rights to us. And armed with these authorizations, we can now go to the institutions to license. Para po kaming bangko. No? Ibibigay sa amin yung deposito, and then kami bahala mag-invest. Pag kumita yon, we go back to our copyright owner members, and then we distribute the money. We started distributing money in 2013 for the license we got from the DepEd, and then the distribution happens triennial, every 3 years. So 2016 at the Ayala Museum, we distributed, and then this December 2, 2019, we will be distributing. The largest amount we distributed was 100,000 pesos. And the second one was 50,000 pesos for a single author. Iniipon po kasi. Why is it called remuneration? Because unlike royalty, it comes from one author or 2 authors, no? For remuneration, it comes from different countries. For example, we received 2.1 million from Australia. Why? Because we discovered that our Filipino nurses who are blogging, their works are printed in Australian schools, and there's a cent corresponding per page. We also discovered that Inquirer and other columnists in the newspapers in the Philippines, their works are printed in schools in Australia because of their columns on people power. So people in the Philippines are not anymore interested in people power. People outside the Philippines are very much interested in people power. Maybe your lives, you and my life would be uninteresting to us, but if you have blogs, they'd be interesting to outsiders. That's why the blogs of nurses are very interesting to outsiders. Why? Because in the UK, if you have 5 patients, you're already a very tired nurse. But in the Philippines, if you have 30 patients, you can still have Instagram and Facebook. Di ba? So, hindi po siya problema. Okay, so, kailan nangyayari yung infringement? When there is a breach of contract sa amin, or kung nag-breach ng contract yung licensee, What's the solution? That's why we have all this problem of infringement and violation of the law. Because we have been, for a very long time, asking the DepEd and CHED to include intellectual property in the curriculum so that we can start young. You can change people already old like me. I'm already 52. Diba? I just got out of the grave. Diba? So, we have to do something for the young people because these are the creators of tomorrow. Okay? So we have to really push hard to include IP in the curriculum. Next, how about photocopy shops? These are the legacy of Marcos. We can't do away with them. Most countries in the world, they admitted that photocopy shops are here to stay. Sabi nila, Alvin, luma na yan. Sa mga advanced countries, they don't photocopy anymore. Wrong. In Japan, which is 10 years ahead of us in technology and everything else, they have 2 CMOs. O ano kayo? Sa Pilipinas is lang, right? You have JAAC and the other one is JCopy. So I know them. So dalawa po sa kanila. Why? Because they have one for the educational sector and the other one for other publications. Sobrang dami ng publication and they're technologically advanced. Then, if you can beat them, you might as well license them. But it will take time. That's why we're focusing on licensing higher education and universities. And then lastly, the question on royalties. In the United States, the Library of Congress, they have their Copyright Royalty Board. We don't have that here in the Philippines. Sabi ko sa inyo, itlog pa lang tayo. The Bureau of Copyright was established on paper in 2013, and they only had 3 persons this year. Ngayon pa lang po sila nagsisimula. See, 6 years. Wala pa. So, what we can propose is we should have a copyright royalty board, maybe under the NBDB, to make proposals for standard royalty rates or even help the publisher and the author to clear things up. Because in the US, they have this, why they have to invent the wheel? All you have to do is go to the website of the Library of Congress and then look at the Copyright Royalty Board. And then I hope it will help us solve our problems. Thank you.
So thank you po, Sir Alvin. So please join us. We're about to start our open forum. But before I start getting questions from the audience, meron po bang questions? What's for lunch? Okay, so I'm gonna start with some questions for our 2 panelists here. So Yani and Sir Alvin, copyright infringement is a big problem in both Indonesia and the Philippines. What can an author or a publisher do, or what has been done, if their works are being infringed? Who do they go up to? What should they start preparing first?
That's a good question, but I think I agree with your one of the point that you raised in the presentation. I mean, contract is your friend. I mean, yeah, I cannot stress this enough. To protect your rights as an author, you have to really know your contract. If you have no clue what a clause means, then go as perhaps you have friends that works as legal to seek for their advice. So in Indonesia, again, it's difficult because when we actually report the case of infringement or pirated copies, they have to go to this what we call Directorate General of Copyright. So you have to apply for the report online, and then you have to provide some documents that say that the work is yours. But then it is going to take a while, and then by the time they actually reach for the comment and give feedbacks, the ones that pirated your copy is no longer there. So it's really difficult for us to actually get down and eradicate the piracy is still a huge problem in Indonesia because the government doesn't actually do anything to just make the regulation, but the enforcement is zero. I think that's the main problem in Indonesia. But as for the what your publishers and author can do, you educate your readers. You have so many social media channels right now. You have Facebook, you have Instagram, you have Twitter. Yesterday, one of the famous authors, Fiersa Bersari, tweeted. So he recently went to an event and he has a book signing. So he signed the books that bought by his fans. So one of them comes up and asks for a signature on a pirated copy. So he has to sign. So he knew that the book is his book. It is. So can you imagine that you have to sign. Someone come to you as for your signature, and you know that this is a pirated copy. So, but he took the higher ground. So instead of berating the person for buying pirated copy, he still signed it. But he also wrote a short message. Please buy the real books, not pirated copies. So he closed it and then returned the book. And he tweeted. So I think that's a good way to I mean, the power of social media is huge. You cannot ignore that. The power of social media is huge. I mean, well, start a campaign, educate the readers that well, most people that buy a pirated book thinks that authors are already rich, the publishers already have so much money. But in truth, is that the book when the book arrives in your hand, when you buy a book, it has gone through so many process from the author that focus to do his best to write, and then the editors that working hard to make sure that the book will be better read, and then the printing company, and then the cover designer. So it involves so many people before it arrives in your hand. So if you buy pirated copies, basically you betray the principle and you cut off their income. So it's not you rob them of their what should be their rewards. I think so.
In answer to the question, the answer is it depends. It depends on who has the rights. So, for example, if you're an author, sometimes, not always, no, the author goes to the publisher and then signs the publishing contract. There are publishing houses in the Philippines where the copyright is shared between the author and the publisher. Why is that so? Because the author submits only a manuscript, and the publisher contributes a lot of value to it. So you hire editor, you hire illustrator, you hire artistic people to give the cover, do the layout, etc. So there's value contributed by the publisher. That's why I understand why some publishing houses want to share the copyright. Also, please remember that the typo even has copyright. So kung ano yung ginamit na typo nung font, no, nung publisher to make it appealing and readable and really enticing to the reader. So they added their value. In some publishing houses, for example, I can cite Visprint, the copyright is given directly back to the author. No, the publisher would get only their expenses, operating expenses, and other things. No, from the sales they deduct it already. But the whole copyright is given back to the author. So the answer to the question is it depends. If the author has the complete rights, the author has the exclusive right, the author should look for suitable solution to the problem. The problem can be solved by just talking to the person or just sending a cease and desist letter, telling the person to stop selling this book or pirating my work. Maybe that will help. Or if you really need to file a case, again, Attorney Buhain can attest to this, life is too short to be spent in courts. It's also expensive. If you can find ways, no, by diplomatic means, no, to approach the person or to find a solution to your problem, that's also fine. Now, if the work is owned jointly by the author and the publisher, I think the best thing is for the publisher to look after the author, because that's your bread and butter. The publishing industry would not move until the authors finished writing the page or even placed the period at the last manuscript. So the publisher should have a mechanism, have a legal counsel at hand to look for a solution to the problem. There are also some solutions provided by the government for free. For example, the National Book Development Board, in the past years, they have the so-called free legal clinic. Free legal clinic, meaning the author or even the publisher can go to this lawyer, the NBDB got these experts and then paid these experts so that the publisher or the author or any person who had a question about the contract or problem with infringement can approach this lawyer for free. Alam niyo kung kailan na nagpunta? 4. You know, as people, we like to complain a lot. But when solutions are given, no one would like to show up. Bakit? Kasi ang office nila sa Ortigas matraffic. I don't want to go there. When will they go there? When there's a problem. No. When you have questions in your contract, then you should already go to avail of this free legal clinics. I don't know if the NBDB would revive it, but I talked to the new head of the Bureau of Copyright, Attorney Emerson Cuyo, and I also presented this to them. Why don't you have this free legal help desk open to all publishers and authors? So that before you go to your own legal counsel, submit the document to them or submit the problem to them, and then they can give you an overview on what you can do or ways you can explore before spending money and going to court. Yun lang po.
I also want to add my answer to Wowie earlier. So a few days ago, one of our content creator contacted me. So publishers in Indonesia approached him to publish his IP in a book format. So they sent him a contract to sign, but he still have no idea about some of the clauses in the contract. So he sent the contract to me and asked for my feedback on it. What interesting is that one of the publisher, can I name it? Yeah, is Gramedia. They put a clause here in one of the clauses that if you sign with us, we will register your book with PRCI, which is similar with yours. So I just read about it and I think that is great. So the publishers also protect the author if in the future his work is being pirated or is being copied. So he one of how PRCI works is that they can only collect the amount of royalties or remuneration from the work that already registered to them. So if you do not register your work to the FICOs, then they cannot collect it on your behalf. So I think I'm not sure if in publishers in the Philippines, because this is also new in Indonesia. So I think that's a good idea. So if you're an author or a publisher, then I think you can include a clause that automatically register your works to the collective agency like FICOs. I think that's a good idea.
Sorry, I'd add something. No, in Anvil, we proposed, Philcos proposed to the current general manager, Attorney Andrea Pasion Flores, to make automatic membership opt out. No, so in the publishing contract, you have here there are 2 boxes. When I sign with Anvil, I would like Anvil to, I'm allowing Anvil to enter into an agreement with a collective licensing organization to manage my reproduction contract, reproduction rights. No, and then the other one is no, I don't want Anvil to enter into an agreement. So that's because we don't want to force people. No, so you have an option. Meaning it's an opt out, no, or opt in if you want. I also proposed the same thing to the new executive director of Clarician Publications. Nandito si Father. Ang ganda ng boses niyan. So ganun din, automatic membership. No? We call it automatic membership, but actually it's not automatic membership because you have the freedom to opt out. No, you check, I don't want to join. Because it facilitates also our work In the initial years, we went to Ilocos up to Central Mindanao. We even visited Marawi just to recruit authors. So it would help us because most of the publishers are here to recruit authors. And you can also help us when there are problems in piracy, so we can already look after them because we are already mandated. Thank you.
So we have a question over here, Ms. Breezy.
I would like to throw my questions to the three speakers. I would like them to answer one by one. And my first question is to Wawi. Do you have any statistics of how many Filipino publishers are undergoing this kind of negotiation on selling and buying of rights? Which is more in practice, the one of selling or the one of buying? My question to Yani, who is a literary agent in Indonesia, like Borobudur, like according to the Indonesia Book Publishers Association, IKP in short, the Vice President for International Affairs, Kartini Nordin, mentioned to me that it is a little difficult for the Indonesian publishers, composed of more than 3,000 in Indonesia, to be a member of the Indonesia Reproductive Rights Organization. My question is, how would you be able to help the IKP in the promotion of the organization of the IRRO through the literary agents? My question to Alvin is, do you have any enforcement power in order to minimize or restrict or prohibit the rampant and illegitimate copying of manuscript or textbook used especially in academic, in higher education? Because as you can see, even in some big state universities and colleges and private universities and colleges in the Philippines have the photocopying machines inside the libraries. Would you be able to, stop them? Or do you have a legal power or enforcement power in order to stop them from doing such illegitimate use? According to the IFRO, which is the International Federation of Reproduction Rights Organization, their policy is that the professor or the student are allowed to photocopy textbooks, manuscripts inside the library or inside the university campuses, on condition that at least 20% of the contents of the book will only be used for personal use, for research or for studies, not for commercial purposes. Because you mentioned in your topic that it's only 10%. I disagree with you because the IFRO says the fair use of this reproduction right is at least 20% of the content of the book are allowable on condition that it is not to be used for commercial. Thank you.
So thank you po, Ms. Breezy. In terms of for St. Matthew's and its children's book imprint, Kahel Press, we've only been doing or exploring the selling and buying of rights under Kahel Press. And Kahel Press has been around for 2 years only. We do not have the statistics of other publishers or in the industry itself in terms of buying and selling rights. I can tell you what we're doing. We've only just started in terms of selling and buying rights. So far we've done, it's not even selling of rights, it's an exchange. So a publisher from Indonesia had 3 books. we had 3 books and then we exchanged rights. So that's one thing that you can do as well, aside from just the regular selling and buying of rights. So when it comes to that sort of transactions for the industry here in the Philippines, I feel that there's much less selling of rights. One of the reasons that I see is that we're not so knowledgeable about licensing, about contracts. So I feel that it's very important that we help each other. We also get support from the government in terms of having capacity building in the legal side of the publishing industry. So I can't really share much about the statistics because I'm not sure if, because during the Frankfurt Book Fair last year, I remember that the NBDB was asking publishers on the results of what transactions they have. I'm not sure if any reports have been. I couldn't give a report because I wasn't able to sell or buy anything at that time. So I'm not sure. It might be with the NBDB. It might be incomplete because other publishers do some sort of exchange in some way, and it would still be considered a sale of rights, licensing of rights.
Okay, to answer your question, I recently how I can help in the AGAPI to promote more about this awareness in licensing. I'm also a member in the National Book Committee. So what we do there is, well, again, through our social media platforms, we announced and we also make several classes, several workshops to what we call lead bit. It's just held. It's entering its second year last September, I think, in one of the classes update about the PRCI as well. And what I would like to try is that I recently established a website called Literacia. So this website is, I hope that can be a hub for publishing news in Southeast Asia. I'm focusing on these neighboring countries as well. There will be more news about the development of the vehicles and then how the success stories that may reach a bigger audience. So they are moved to be a member of the PRCI and then register their works to the collective agencies. I think that's it.
Nakakatakot yung tanong ni Ma'am, ano pang Miss Universe? First, we can only enforce the rights of our rights holders. So those who are not members, we can't do anything about it. And then number 2, regarding the limits, it depends on the country. If it's possible for us to, I have already heard feedbacks from different publishing houses and some legal councils to amend our limits. So I have to look into that for maybe for 2020 because we'll have a new board for 2020. Thank you.
Any one last question? Yes, ma'am. I was about to jump over the flowers and give you a microphone.
Thank you. On the publisher's end, I was just wondering, are publishers also liable for publishing, for putting out books there that may have portions that infringe on the copyright of others or are claimed by other people? Like, for example, an author submits a manuscript and then the book is done and then somebody comes in and claims that parts of their work have been included in the book but are not credited to them. So are the publishers also liable for that?
So I'm going to speak as a publisher, and it happened to us. So I showed it earlier that there was artwork plagiarism for one of our picture books. And are we liable? So I'm saying it outright, I guess, that we are not. In our contract, and I guess even if you don't have a contract, but in our contract with that illustrator, there is a section that says warranties. So for the section on warranties, it says that the content creator warrants that their work is original, and that if the work is being called out, or someone finds out that there is infringement on the part of the content creator, the content creator guarantees that the publisher will not be will not be implicated because it's the content creator's fault. I mean, you have to consider the fact that when you're in the publishing industry, it's a partnership, and if your partner does something wrong and you're somehow involved in it, you would do your best to identify the responsibilities of each partner. So for the instance, for the situation that I showed earlier, it was just the responsibility of the illustrator. I get a lot of, when this thing became viral, people would tell me na, no, it's the publisher's fault because they didn't check. How can we check? Because the character that was copied or traced or whatever is simply called the little girl. Should I go to Google and search Google Images, little girl, and check every image there? How are we supposed to know? So our recourse is really to have that contract, to remind the illustrator that, hey, if you do something wrong, there's another section called breach of contract, and there's a 50,000 peso penalty. So that's their responsibility, and other things that that we evaluate that that would compensate the damages that were done to us during that agreement.
Sorry last na po ito talaga. Kasi nandito po lahat ng publisher. So, sa isang publishing house po dito, tulad na itatago ko na lang sa pangalang Aviva, meron po silang copyright permissions officer or researcher. The role of this person is to make sure that all the materials there are cleared na yung copyright. So siguro sa publishing houses po natin, in our own publishing houses, we can assign a person, a point person. Now, under the law, di ba, we have data privacy officers, right? That's required under the law. Now, this is another thing. We should have copyright permissions officers in our own publishing houses to make sure that all the contents there, all the copyright has been cleared. No? So para po malinaw, wala tayong cargo. And then also, tama po yung sinabi ni Wawi na merong sa contract na warrant. Or sa ibang companies ang ginagawa nila, they ask the author to execute an affidavit saying na lahat ng material na nandoon walang sabit at hindi na kinopya. Yun po lamang, salamat po.
Well, I agree with Wowi, but to repeat her on the importance of contract is your friend. So basically everything as a publisher or as an author or illustrator, just refer to the contract. A publisher is the safest way for you is to put warranties, and I mean the contract is said clearly that if the work of trust is breached, then heavy penalties will be applied. I think that's good. I also want to add a point to what Alvin said. I think well, if you have the time, if you have the person responsible, especially assigned to search if the book or the content is original or not, I think that will be great. But again, editor have, I think the finger when something slip a typo, the finger will be pointed to the editor. But editor also have limited time. They can only do so much. I mean, again, my suggestion is back to the contract, and then make sure that everything written there is protecting your interests, and then you don't let any loophole that came back and bite you. So yeah, I agree with Wowi. One-page contract is bad. So make sure that everything it may look long and may look intimidating long contracts, but it is for your own good. Thank you.
All right, so I wasn't able to say contracts are friends 3 times, but I'm glad Yani said it 2 more times. So that's it. I'm so happy that you guys did intermittent fasting along with us this morning, and maybe just a quick launch because there's so much more we're going to learn from other speakers today. So thank you very much for listening.